The cyclocross calendar is full, I think we can all agree on that. Well, at least all of us bar the UCI. This weekend we would have had another double booking, Super Prestige and Boom on Saturday and then the Scheldecross on Sunday in Antwerp 40 minutes up the road. However, the Scheldecross has now been cancelled. Meanwhile, across the pond we'll have the Pan American Championships. They'll be held in Garland, Texas this year, the second of 2 Continental Championships. So that makes 3 races over the space of 2 days, with another weekend of Essen, Val d'Isole and the US Nationals next week. Then we get Rukven and Namur both in the World Cup, and then the kerstperiode starts where we get Dendermonde, Zolder, Diegem, Loenhout, Baal and Hulst all over the course of 8 days. Frankly, it's too much racing, there's too little time for too many races, and it's showing. Lars van der Haar, our brand new European champion, third in the World Cup standings going into the most recent round in Besançon, skipped that round and is skipping the next round of Val d'Isole for recovery reasons. Women's world champion Lucinda Brandt and Toon Aert also won't be in Val d'Isole. Pan American champion Magali Rochette has made 3 cross-Atlantic flights in the past 2 weeks and is seemingly still going to miss out on defending her title. And with Van der Poel, Van Aert and Pidcock all returning, all 3 do so with scattered, almost random calendars because there's so much racing they can't do them all. So with that in mind, I thought we'd talk a little bit about the calendar today, question frivolously who and how this calendar is even allowed to exist, and propose a few simple solutions that would alleviate the stress a little bit. Now, the problem with the calendar not really working is, as with most problems in cycling, caused largely by the UCI. This season, after not being able last year due to, the whole pandemic thing, the UCI have expanded the World Cup from 9 to 16 rounds. This in a bid to further establish itself as the main cyclocross competition and in an attempt to further internationalise the sport. However, the World Cup expansion has essentially been forced through, pushing other races from their dates, moving classics to the front of the calendar, and essentially alienating riders and teams alike from competing properly in every round of every competition. As mentioned before, Lars van der Haar will be skipping the rounds in Besançon and Val d'Isole. His entire Baloise Trek team won't be there in Val d'Isole, in fact. Meanwhile, a sport supposedly trying to make inroads in North America is forcing the Continental champion to make all these crazy flights. It is also making it impossible for the national US champion to compete in multiple rounds of the World Cup and compete for her own national title. Essentially, the World Cup this season is stifling all other races. It's simultaneously so big that it's impossible to ride all of the rounds, especially without a recovery break being available because the calendar is so full. But it's also not big enough to act as a Formula 1 style pinnacle of the sport. It's this weird middle ground that doesn't really work. And somehow, despite now making this 16 round calendar that nobody really likes, half the races are clearly filler. A round in Dendermonde or in Rukven is clearly a filler race that's been put there because they don't actually have a good event to put on. I find it completely baffling that the Super Prestige in Gavre, for example, can be moved all the way to February just so we can have a lovely little race and a flat field somewhere in Rukven or Dendermonde. Now, this whole World Cup expansion has brought a handful of problems to the fore, the most glaring one being the issue we're seeing emerge right now at the start of December. Traditionally, and like I said, this has been going on for years, riders take short training camps around this time of year to prepare for the crazy kerstperiode and the Worlds. For some reason, the UCI have decided to use this exact moment to place their "Hey look IOC, we can race on snow, Winter Olympic funding please" race. They've also slapped the Scheldecross here, but that'll be cancelled now. And they've put Rukven as the first week back from these breaks, Namur is the day after as well, making essentially 3, maybe 4 rounds of the World Cup somewhat dubious for participation. And that's not even including Besançon, which Van der Haar and Quinten Hermans both skipped. Van der Haar even mentioned in an interview with Sportser that he would happily take part in races like Besançon and Val d'Isole, but the season is just too long, so you have to make sacrifices somewhere. Van der Haar is choosing to sacrifice the trips that are longer, which obviously makes sense for recovery reasons. Now, early December continues to be a problem for planning and calendars, as the 4th of December, the same day as Boom, sees the Pan American Championships. A week later on the 12th, the same day as Val d'Isole, are the US Nationals. These have been placed in ridiculous places. Would a rider like, I don't know, Koppenberg winner, former X2O GC leader, and generally best hope for a not Dutch win in the near future, Clara Honsinger, really want to be making this exhausting trip across the ocean to race one race to then go all the way back again. Surely there's a better way to go about this, and that is even if she bothers to go to the Pan Ams. So far, none of the podium sitters from the last edition are on the start list. No Rochette, no Honsinger, and no Farringer. And Farringer hasn't even left the US, so I don't even know why she's not doing it. Now, the calendar quite clearly needs some reworking, and I've decided that I'll take it upon myself to start off that reworking and give a few suggestions. Now, before we get busy with it, I'll set a few little parameters. Firstly, we're going to guarantee a weekend with no important racing in order to create space for training camps. The weekend of Essen-Val d'Isole is pretty much perfect for this, so we'll be choosing that one. The new calendar will also be made in such a way that all riders are treated as equal as possible. For that reason, the Continental Championships will be placed on the same weekend. The structure of early American races will be kept. I think that's generally quite a good thing. I've also taken the decision to cut the World Cup back to 12 races. For now, this is really the maximum you can get away with without obliterating the entire calendar. I can see scenarios in the future where we go back up to the 16-round World Cup, maybe even more, but for now there's no way to realistically do this. So without further ado, welcome to Matt's far superior cyclocross calendar for future glorious international racing. Rolls right off the tongue, that one, doesn't it? So we'll start in September, and we'll do that with the typical ATS courses, Lokeren, Beringen, people like that. Then the Super Prestige will kick off with Gieten, as it always does, to kick off the classifications. After Gieten we head to America. In America we'll go back to 2 rounds. The first World Cup cut is one of these 3. A midweek round makes no sense for spectators of viewership. It doesn't promote the sport, it's hard to watch. If anything, it makes it more of a joke. So we're going back to Sunday race, week off, Sunday race. Now, presumably the races that we keep will be Waterloo and Iowa. Though I'm not really against keeping Fayetteville, I also wouldn't be against going to like Lakewood or Louisville or somewhere like that. I think there's better courses than the 3 that are currently on the World Cup anyway. But basically, that's the start. By this point we're in mid-October, and on the weekend that this year was taken up by Ruddervoorde and Zonhoven. And what I do is make this the Continental Championships weekend. This is the first big major change, and this weekend would see all the European riders head back to Europe to compete in the European Championships, whilst all the Americans would get to stay on their side of the pond for an extra weekend to compete in the Pan Ams, and then eventually make the trip over next weekend. This next weekend would include the now 3rd round of the World Cup, which would be Overijse, and then you'd have the Koppenberg the day after. Ruddervoorde Zonhoven, you'll move further back into November. They take up the space vacated by the Euros being moved forwards. In fact, I believe this could even help get Zonhoven the necessary viewership it requires. Zonhoven being so early in the calendar tends to hurt its support in ticket sales, and ticket sales are really necessary for keeping Zonhoven alive. I've also tried to find a way to get the US and Canadian nationals in here somehow without it being, held on a Wednesday or whatever like that. I think the best way to do this is probably put them on the same weekend as Gieten, which would make them almost the opening event of the calendar, which feels somewhat disrespectful towards the US and Canada, but at the same time it's the best thing I've been able to come up with. If you've got any better suggestions, please let me know. I'm very much open for them, but it seems the best way for now. Now, from this moment on, we get properly into European territory. Koppenberg happens and the cross properly starts. Throughout November you won't see many changes. We'll go to Tabor, Kokzijde, Besançon and now Zonhoven as well. It's a busy month for World Cups, but it's still pretty doable. It's in early December where we really start to get the next changes. Here we're going to make major cuts to the World Cup. We've already cut one race from the World Cup to go from 16 to 15. Now we're going to go from 15 to 12. Antwerpen, Rukven and Dendermonde are no longer World Cup crosses. They're absolutely in no way, shape or form good enough to be part of the World Cup anyway. Antwerpen is a very maybe but not quite, but Rukven and Dendermonde are quite frankly a bit of a joke. So we're getting rid of them, they're simply not up to par. This brings us down to the 12 World Cup races that we want. Now from here what we're going to do is shift Val d'Isole a week forward from the 12th to the 5th. This gives us a weekend in which only Essen is ridden, arguably the worst race on the calendar. We'll use this weekend for training camps. I would also suggest moving the Super Prestige and Boom. My current calendar creates a double header with Boom and Val d'Isole, and that's not really doable, it's a very long trip. To solve this, I'd suggest moving Boom back 2 weeks to the space vacated by Rukven the day before Namur, and it'd be essentially the first race back. Alternatively, you can swap Boom and Grand Prix Leuven, for example. Have Leuven move to the day before Val d'Isolé, and then a Boom Tabor doubleheader could be a thing. From Namur again, nothing major changes. Then the Monde leaves the calendar, Zolder returns to its Boxing Day slot, and I suppose we have a day free and we get a bit more rest, which is probably quite nice at this time of year. From here on out, not many changes anymore. The only change I'd make to the back end of the calendar is returning Gavre to its rightful place between the major races. I'd suggest maybe even using the slot left open by Den de Monde, and it would share the 26th and 27th of December with Zolder. Alternatively, if Boom moves to the Rukven slot, Gavre and Leuven could swap places, and Gavre would be back in November where we all know it should belong. Other than that, January and February stay roughly the same. You'd get the European Nationals in the first weekend. It'd be a bit dull for the Americans, but it's, again, the best I can do. From then on, we get the classic season end. Hoge Heide closes the World Cup, then the Worlds happen, the Super Prestige finishes, and then eventually the X2O Trophy finishes in Lille and in Brussels. Finally, we get the Sluitingsprijs in Oostmalle, which most people seem to have forgotten exists. Does it even still get held? I don't know. But there you have it. That's my far better version of the UCI Cyclocross calendar, something I believe we should all be trying to work towards. Now, if you like that, if you think it's good, if you've got any more suggestions, please do let me know, because I'm very curious. There's a few little problems with it I still want to work out, but generally I think it's a step in the right direction, and I think it's a step that we should be trying to make in the near future. And I think with that I've reached the end of what I've really got to say. So it's a very big thank you for watching, for paying attention, and for giving me the time to randomly ramble about the calendar towards you. I'd wish you all a lovely happy holiday season coming up, and I'll see you all next week, where I'm planning on holding a nice little story about Jan de Nieuwelaar.